Ever get sucked into, like, listening to a police scanner? You know that feeling. Just totally hooked on the raw chatter, the unfiltered everyday stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's kind of the vibe of today's deep dive.
Yeah.
But instead of, sirens and all that, we're tuning into the world of CB radio and these online platforms.
Yeah.
Things like XZELLO,
Yeah, it's funny you say that because those platforms, people think they're like niche or even outdated, but they're actually amazing. You can find incredible human interaction there. I mean, really rich stuff.
Right.
We're talking hours and hours of these conversations, and they're totally unfiltered, raw human connection playing out right there in the digital world.
And that's exactly what you gave me, this huge collection of audio. And I got to say, at first I was a little overwhelmed. It's a lot. Thousands of hours of people just talking. So where do you even start with something like this?
Honestly, you just got to dive in.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly you realize it's like you've stumbled into this buzzing town square. Everyone's got their own distinct voice, their own story, their own little quirks.
Totally.
It's like those snippets of conversation you overhear at a coffee shop. You catch pieces of people's lives, but this is like that, just amplified.
It's so true. It's like eavesdropping, but in a good way, right?
Yeah.
And as you listen, you start picking up on these little details, and it hits you. These are real people living real lives, and they're using these platforms in ways, ways you'd never really expect.
100%. I mean, right off the bat, you come across this guy who only wants to be called Chat or Check the Jet. And if someone gets it wrong, oh man, he gets so worked up. It's incredible.
Yeah. I remember that. That really struck me because it shows how important identity is. Like, even in these spaces where you'd think you're anonymous, even when you're just a voice, the name you choose, the persona you put out there, it matters.
It's totally about crafting your own identity, even in this weird, disembodied world. And it makes you think about, like, the bigger picture of online identity, especially now when everything's changing so fast. Anonymity, online personas, it's all a moving target.
Right. It's like choosing a username, but with real-time consequences. Okay, but speaking of fascinating people, we have to talk about Granny 420. She's quickly becoming a favorite.
Oh, Granny 420, she's great. Just figuring out tech as she goes, dealing with everyday life, and of course, enjoying her cannabis. Honestly, she really challenges all those assumptions about who uses these platforms.
It's hilarious. But it's more than that. She's like this amazing blend of generations. You've got the tech side, and then you've got her adapting to it all.
Yeah.
It's actually really heartwarming to hear her embracing it all, even if it's a bit of a struggle sometimes.
Exactly. She reminds us that these online spaces aren't just for, like, techie millennials, It's everyone. It's a total cross-section of society, and they're all there for different reasons. That's what makes it so interesting.
And then you've got the book lover who is on this constant hunt for vintage paperbacks. You can just hear the passion in their voice. It's contagious.
For sure. The way they talk about their collection, it's incredible. But it's also real, They talk about the challenges of storage, organization, all that. It reminds you that even when you're online, you're still tied to the real world and its limitations.
Right. It's like they're playing a real-life game of Tetris, but instead of blocks, it's first editions. But I love it because it shows that whatever your thing is, however niche, you can find your people in these digital communities. You're not alone.
Exactly. And that's a big takeaway here. These platforms might look totally different on the surface, but they all tap into this fundamental human need. We crave connection. We want to share experiences. It's just human nature.
So we've got Chat, Granny 420, the book lover, all these amazing characters coming to life through these conversations. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But it makes you think, what else is hidden in these recordings? What else can we learn from them?
And that's where things get really interesting. If you go beyond those individual voices, if you look at all the conversations, you start to see these recurring themes, these patterns start to emerge, and they reveal something deeper about what's really going on when we're online.
Okay, I like where this is going. So what are some of those patterns? What kind of things are we seeing beneath the surface? So these hidden patterns, these recurring themes you were talking about, what are we seeing? Give me an example.
Well, one thing that pops up right away is like this need for rituals. And you see it in all these little things. Like they use all the CB slang, right? Like 73, which means best regards.
Right.
Or even just doing those routine radio checks. And it's fascinating, These tiny little phrases, they seem so small, but they actually create this sense of order, this familiarity. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's like their own language, like a secret handshake.
Yeah.
Saying we're all in this together, even if we're miles apart, even if it's just through static and wires, we're a community.
Yeah, exactly. And it all comes back to that need for structure. for knowing what to expect. Even when you're just chatting online, just letting your thoughts flow, we still crave those familiar things. It's human nature, I guess.
Totally. And speaking of familiar things, one theme that really surprised me was how often these platforms turn into like these informal support groups. People jump on to ask for tech advice, even medical opinions. It's wild. It's like having a digital village elder or something.
It really is. And what's amazing is how quickly it happens, how natural it feels. Like you'll have someone in Ohio asking for medical advice, and who answers? Some retired nurse in Alaska. I mean, these two would never cross paths in real life. But here they are online, connecting, supporting each other, sharing what they know. It's really kind of beautiful.
It really shows you how powerful these platforms can be. We think of the internet as isolating, but in these spaces, it's the opposite. It's all about community, about bridging those gaps.
100%. And then there are these moments where it's like the real world just starts to bleed in, you know? Like suddenly they go from chatting about, I don't know, the price of tea to hurricane warnings to election results. It's like this microcosm of how we deal with information overload.
Yeah. I remember that. It's like 1 minute, it's totally normal, everyday stuff. The next, it's like major news, breaking news right there in the chat.
It's fascinating. You get to see how people are interpreting these huge events, how they're debating them, how they become part of the conversation, you know? It reminds us that even when you think you're in your own little online world, you're never really that far removed from everything else. We're all connected.
It's true. We're all part of the same world, just experiencing it through different channels, I guess. Okay, but speaking of experiencing things, we have got to talk about this Martian Death March.
Oh man, the Martian Death March. Now that is a story.
It's incredible. So for anyone who hasn't heard it, this is like this ongoing sci-fi story.
Yeah.
And it's told and retold across all these different conversations. It's like a digital campfire story passed around and built upon with every telling.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. It's not just the story itself. It's what it tells us about how much we need to create these narratives, these shared stories.
Yeah. It's like this collective act of storytelling. Everyone builds on each other's ideas. They fill in the gaps. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, why are we drawn to that? What is it about these collaborative stories, even in the digital age, that really grabs us?
You know, I think it's that basic need to understand the world, to find meaning in things. And doing it together, sharing those experiences, even if they are about Martians and stuff, it helps.
Especially in a world that can feel so isolating sometimes. These digital campfire stories, these shared narratives, they become even more important, you know?
Absolutely. They remind us that even when we're lost in this huge digital world, we're not alone. We're hardwired to look for connection, to search for meaning, to escape a little. And sometimes we find it in the most unexpected places.
It's true. It's like we've stumbled onto this online speakeasy, but instead of cocktails, we're sharing stories and building these connections with people. It's actually kind of moving when you think about it.
It really is. And it just goes to show you, we dismiss these little online spaces. You know, we think they're insignificant, but we're wrong. They give us this window into what it means to be human. And at the end of the day, it's that human connection that really matters. That's what ties us all together.
I gotta say, going into this whole thing, I really thought CB radio and online chat would be like this massive sea of voices, impersonal, you know, but it's not like that at all. It's so much more personal, more human.
That's what gets me every time. We write these platforms off, you know, like they're old news, yesterday's tech, but they show us something so real about what it means to be human.
It's so true. It's like we've gotten past all that social media stuff, all the carefully constructed personas, and we've found this place that's just, I don't know, authentic.
And in that space, you see it. Those things we all want, no matter who you are, that need to belong, that search for meaning, you know, just being able to share experiences and connect with someone.
It really makes you think, like, for all the tech, all the progress, those basic human needs, they haven't changed a bit.
It's true. And it makes you think about, like, our whole relationship with technology, you know? Are we using all this to run from ourselves? Or are we trying to get back to something real, something that's harder and harder to find in the real world?
Whoa, that's a big one. And honestly, that's something I hope everyone listening thinks about too. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the worlds of CB and online chat, what's the one thing you want people to take away from all this?
Okay, so you're online. Right. And you find yourself in this weird corner of the internet. Maybe it's some forum. Maybe it's a community you've never even heard of. And it seems, I don't know, a little strange. Don't write it off. Seriously. Because that just might be your own little digital speakeasy, you know, the place where you can actually connect, share some stories, and just remember that even when it feels like it, you're never really alone out there.
I love that. The perfect way to end it. Thanks for joining me and diving into all this with me. This was really eye-opening.
Anytime. It was great.
And to everyone listening, thank you. Thanks for coming along on this journey into, well, into the heart of digital chatter. Until next time, keep exploring those rabbit holes, you never know what you'll find.